Excellent, thank you very much. Can I welcome all councillors, officers and members of the public present and those viewing on YouTube. My name is Amanda Rigby and I'm the chair of the subcommittee. And I will now introduce the other members of the subcommittee and ask them to confirm that they are present. Councillor Steve Hedges.
Present.
And Councillor Sally Davis.
Present.
Thank you very much. Also present are Terrell Wallin, the Senior Licensing Officer, Shane Lewis and Mark Durnford, Democratic Services Officer. Shane Lewis is legal. Can I remind councillors, officers and members of the public to keep background noise to a minimum, to only speak one person at a time and to not speak over others. Please mute your microphones when not speaking and then unmute when you're invited to speak. Please indicate if you wish to speak by using the chat facility on Zoom by typing MIS and you will be called to speak in turn. If a member of the subcommittee has to leave the meeting, then please draw my attention to this again by using the chat facility, as the meeting will need to adjourn as 3 members are required at all times. When returning to the meeting, please also draw my attention to this in the same way. Members should also inform me if they lose connection and miss any part of the meeting. Item 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any, Mark?
No, thankfully, Chair, you're all here.
Excellent, thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Hedges, have you got a declaration of interest?
No, I haven't.
Councillor Davis?
No.
I do have a declaration. Let me just get it up for a second. So I was copied in on an email about this application. I dealt with it by saying that I couldn't get involved with any conversations about it. I have disregarded any observations and they're not a valid, because they weren't a valid representation in the application anyway. I have an open mind in the matter before me. I will not make up my mind until I've considered the relevant report, all the material factors that are contained within it, and heard all points of view at the hearing. Announce any urgent business as agreed by the chair. I haven't been told of any urgent business, so we won't be doing that. Minutes of the previous meeting. Members of the committee, are you happy with them as a correct record of the meeting?
I'm happy.
Yes.
Perfect, and I'm happy as well. So at some stage when we're allowed to physically be with people, I will actually sign them. I'm just going to read out the licensing procedure, just so that everyone is aware of what we're doing and where we are at any stage. First of all, has everyone actually received this licensing procedure to begin with? I'm not seeing anyone saying anything. Okay, well, I think I'll read it through anyway, just to make certain that everyone's aware of what we're doing. What will happen is Terrell, as licensing officer, will do a summary and an update, and then the applicant will present their case and they will call witnesses if they wish to. And then the applicant can be questioned by us as members, but also the other parties, so the people who have registered to speak here. Then the other parties make their case and they may also call witnesses. There are questions to the other parties by the applicant and by members. Responsible authorities make a case, but I believe that we haven't had any representations from responsible authorities in this. Other parties sum up, applicant sums up, we all adjourn, we make our minds up, and then we reconvene and we tell you what our decision is. To make it fair, we allow 20 minutes per side. So however many people are talking from the applicant side, you have 20 minutes, and however many people are talking from the other party's side, you have 20 minutes. Is all that clear? Nod at me. Good. Good. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. In that case, Terrell, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This hearing is to determine a new premises licence application made under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 by Mr. Charles Simpson in respect of Pipley Barn Cafe, Brockham End, Lansdowne Bath BA1 9BZ. The application proposes the retail sale of alcohol for consumption both on and off the premises, Monday to Thursday 0800 to 2100 hours, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 0800 to 2300 hours, with the premises closing 30 minutes after the last permitted sale. The proposed licensed premises, as detailed in Annex B of the report, comprises of an indoor cafe, bunker barn, and external seating areas outside of the cafe. The application was duly served on all the responsible authorities and advertised within the Bath Chronicle. During the 28-day consultation period, 24 relevant representations of objection were received by the authority, each expressing concern that the applicant's proposal to sell alcohol at the premises is likely to undermine the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective. 2 objections also referenced public safety licensing objective. No representations have been received from the responsible authorities. Additional information has been received from the applicant Chris Simpson, Elizabeth Campbell on behalf of herself and 9 other residents, and Mr. Simon Hell. This information was circulated to all parties in advance of the hearing. Please note that planning, parking and traffic are not members for this committee. And Councillor Mark Roper has been nominated to represent the residents who have engaged in the licensing process. The committee is asked to determine the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terrell. So, Mr. Simpson, this is your chance. You have 20 minutes to present your application.
Good morning, everybody. Well, my application has already been, so I've already made it up, submitted it, and I've also recently added some concessions to the application. I think Terrell explained the hours that I was requesting. There has emerged a planning issue at the moment, which is that my cafe is obliged to close at 4 p.m, whereas it was closing at 5 p.m. So I've modified the hours of operation of the cafe to close at 4 p.m. until such time as we could possibly get that reviewed by the planning department. However, I'm still applying for an alcohol license to run to the later hours mentioned in the application, which is 9:30 most days and 11 p.m. Friday, Saturday and Sunday, because I also run a Cotswold Way bunk barn, which whilst it's not operational at the moment, I feel I should be able to sell alcoholic refreshments to my guests. And beyond that, I really don't have anything to add, but I'm quite happy to answer any questions on any relevant topics that the licensing committee may have.
Okay, could you mute yourself, Councillor Roper? Thank you. Questions. Councillor Hedges, have you any questions?
I won't. Is he aware if we were reminded to give him the license, that even if he got the license, he would still have to close at 10 as per government instructions?
Yes, do answer, Mr. Simpson.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with Zoom and I didn't see the green box around my thing. Yes, I am aware that under current COVID restrictions, in fact, there's a number of restrictions that we have to operate under at the moment, and they do change day by day. So of course, I'm aware that under current restrictions, I would not be able to sell alcohol refreshments at any time after 10 p.m.
Okay. Any more questions, Councillor Hedges? No. Councillor Davis.
No question, thank you.
Okay, I've got, it's sort of a point of clarification, I guess, more than just a question. It's not just that you couldn't operate after 10 because of the current guidance from the government. You couldn't operate after 4 because that is what you have planning permission for. So whatever the least generous of the 2 acts is the one that you have to stay to. So just to make sure you're aware that, you know, were this to be given to you, you wouldn't be able to operate to those hours without going back to planning.
Yes, I'm absolutely sure. With regards to the cafe, which cafe operation, no, I wouldn't. What I would like some clarification on is, in the event that I was to reopen the bunk barn, I think that's unlikely this year, but in the event that I was, and I was serving to guests within the building, which would not, I submit, might not be part of the cafe operation, that might be an issue that I might need to take advice and guidance on. Perhaps you might be able to give me some.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely a planning consideration, not a licensing consideration. So
Okay.
that isn't something that we would advise to. So the other parties, I seem to have Liz and Robert, it just says Cam, I can't see the last bit, Mike Hennigan and Councillor Mark Roper. Have any of you any questions for the applicant?
Sorry, not at this stage, no. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
No, not at this stage, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hennigan?
Also not at this stage.
Okay. And Liz and Robert, I'm sorry, I can't see your surname. No, not at this stage. Okay. So the other parties, which are Liz and Robert, Mike Hennigan and Councillor Mark Roper, you now have 20 minutes to present your case.
Okay, shall I go first?
Yeah.
Fine. I'm reading out a statement on behalf of Liz and Robert Campbell. We welcome the opportunity to present our case to the licensing subcommittee. We request that when considering the application from Charles Simpson, the subcommittee takes into account the sensitive natural environment surrounding Pickley Barn, the unusual acoustics within the valley, the high amenity value of this tranquil outdoor space, and the location between two busy cities. We believe that it is hugely important for the subcommittee to understand just how prized this area is for its wildlife, tranquility, and opportunities for outdoor recreation. We feel that the area is an essential resource for local people's physical health and mental well-being. We have supplied information on the importance of tranquility with reference to recent research and government policy. This asserts that tranquility is a key amenity for local residents and recreational users. And it identifies a planning condition within the delegated report for Pickley Barn, which shows that the local planning authority has also identified a need to safeguard local amenities in this area. It states that the cafe use hereby approved shall not be carried out and no customer shall be served or remain on the premises outside the hours of 9 o'clock and 4 p.m. Reason to safeguard the amenities of nearby occupiers. The residents therefore request that the subcommittee seriously consider the public noise nuisance of the proposed premises against the existing tranquility of the local area. The residents would also like to draw the subcommittee's attention to the fact that the cafe at Pickley Barn should be ancillary to a bunk barn. Pickley Barn was converted about 5 years ago, but it's been mainly used as a private residence. There was just one short period when a room with 6 beds was offered through one booking on the Airbnb website. The reviews on Airbnb show that the room was mainly booked by individuals, couples and families. The cafe at Pickley Barn is a relatively new adventure. It was opened during lockdown on May the 9th this year. The residents have already experienced public nuisance from noise, and this is outlined in our supporting documentation. However, the real growth in activity has happened after the deadline for representations on August the 28th. While the residents were busy submitting their representations, the applicant announced on Facebook that he now had a marquee in the adjacent field. His advert stated that 160 people could be entertained that Sunday afternoon. It was a huge shock to us, especially as this was during a period when social distancing was required. It can only be assumed that more people will be invited to events once normality resumes. The residents believe that the scale of this event and the previously tranquil nature of the local environment could strongly lead to the conclusion that no premises license should be permitted. However, we are willing to believe that an alcohol license might not create a public nuisance of noise if, 1, the hours are restricted to the hours of 9 to 4 p.m. as permitted by the local planning authority, and 2, the applicant brings his existing activities in line with the planning permission that was granted by the local planning authority in 2014. In response to the applicant's additional information supplied on 17th of November, we strongly object to a 6 p.m. closing time for bunk barn users. Pickley Barn was converted about 5 years ago and has never operated as a bunk barn. The only capacity ever offered was for a maximum of 6 beds in one room through one booking. The residents do not believe that a room for 6 constitutes a good case for extending an alcohol license. The residents also question whether there is an intention to provide bunk barn or any other form of holiday accommodation in the future. Similar Airbnb operations resumed business on July the 4th, so Pickley Barn could have resumed letting its room to families of up to 6. However, it is understood that the owner of the barn is moving back in October, and employees at the cafe are also living on site. This suggests to us that a bunk barn is still not planned. Nevertheless, even if a bunk barn is reopened, the residents believe that it would be very difficult for the authorities to differentiate between cafe users and bunk barn users. The residents also strongly object to the applicant's condition to hold no more than 4 events a month. This is far more than had been anticipated when the applicant requested occasional events. We are strongly of the opinion that the site is not suited to large weekly events, such as the one advertised on the 20th of August. The fact that the applicant wants to hold such events suggests to us that he does not understand the sensitivity and existing popularity of the local area. This is backed up by many planning breaches that are currently being investigated, and by the applicant's own statement that he feels the current planning restrictions on the cafe are a little restrictive. We therefore ask the subcommittee members to seriously consider restricting off-premises events to temporary events notices. This would allow the impacts of the applicant's plans to be properly considered by the many stakeholders who currently enjoy this rare pocket of tranquility, which is so easily accessible from more urban areas. The residents are keen to continue sharing this unique environment, but they also understand how important it is to protect it for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roper. Mr. Hennigan, you have 15 minutes left.
At this stage, I don't have anything to add to that at this point.
Thank you very much. And Liz and Robert, are you happy that Councillor Roper has spoken on your behalf? Right, we'll go to questions. I'll go the opposite way this time. Councillor Davis, have you got any questions?
Yes, it's just one. I just wonder, Councillor Roper, the people you read on behalf of, are they aware of the 10s? They would have no representation there. It's just environmental protection and police. I'm not sure that you can answer on their behalf, but hopefully you can.
Could you repeat that question? Sorry, I've got very poor reception here. Sorry.
Sorry. Are you aware of the 10s, a temporary event notice?
Yes, yeah.
They actually don't have a chance to put a representation in there. It's environmental protection and police.
Yes, yeah, we are aware of that, yeah.
And have they reported their concerns about the disturbance of the tranquility to the appropriate authorities at this stage, do you know?
They have reported it to the planning authorities, and we have made initial contact with the police about concerns with parking and environmental health. We've not contacted environmental health yet, but that is an option we're looking at now.
Thank you.
In terms of noise.
Liz, you look like you were waving because you wanted to say something. Please feel free. You're still on mute.
Oldham and Sheffield reflects the need to have people to get into particular communities that the normal systems aren't really able to get into so easily and understand. So, you know, it's situational as well. That's my current view anyway. Everything can develop as the situation develops.
And I think that's really important to recognise.
Someone got the radio or television on. We can hear.
Yeah, the YouTube channel.
Situation could be very different to what we have, and we'll need to make sure that we've got the tools in place to.
You seem to be getting some interference, and that sounds like Councillor Dina Romero to me.
It is.
Mike, can you see what's going wrong, please?
It seems to be whenever I allow Liz and Robert's microphone comes on, that you can hear them in the background. I was wondering if they've got any YouTube channels open in the back of their screen. They've got any other channels open?
What's going on?
Yeah, if you could kind of close everything else and just.
I'd like to make, and then I'll hand back to Rosie.
Can I check you haven't got any other tabs open on your system at all at the bottom or top?
Got anything else you wanted to add? Anything that you don't think we've covered?
No. I mean, I just think just very quickly, just to echo what Bruce has said. I mean, the last 5 months has been a bit of a hockey stick learning curve, and there is an awful lot of knowledge and experience out there about what worked and what didn't work, which actually does.
I mean, I think possibly, and I know this isn't the way we generally do this, but we can't hear you when we've got that other in the background. So my suggestion is you go on mute, and the piece that you wanted to say, could you maybe put in the chat function so we can read it there, and I'll read it out so that everyone can see it. Would that work? Is that allowable, Shane, from a legal point of view?
Already put in place, I think.
I think, provided that the representations can be made to the committee, now whether that be in writing, and if they are happy to do that, then yes, we can continue on that basis. If it goes into chat, I'm presuming that all the participants, whether part of this Zoom and on observing on YouTube, can see the chat.
I believe participants can see it, but my understanding, and Mike will tell me if I'm wrong, is that viewers on YouTube can't, which is why I said I would read it out so that people could hear what was being said.
I would imagine that those on YouTube are not party to the hearing then, and in which case I don't think it would make any difference that they couldn't see it on YouTube, provided it is restricted to those in the hearing. Then
Some of the questions anyway.
Provided everybody else is happy.
Councillor Davis, is that something that you're happy as a way of going forward, yeah. Councillor Hedges?
The other alternative is they actually write their question and hold it to the screen, but I think your idea of writing it in chat is much more sensible.
That's the first time you've ever called me sensible, Councillor Davis. This is a red letter day. I
also agree, but maybe they could turn their computer off and then turn it back on again and re-enter that way. Just before.
Okay. So can I just check, Liz and Robert, are you going to be entering stuff in the chat function so we can read it out, or are you happy that Mark, you're on mute, and we're going to hear Dina again, I am.
No,
oh, we're not.
Hello.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
Yes, the only thing I was going to say is when you were talking about temporary event notices, you asked whether we were aware if we could make representations. We weren't aware. So that was just a minor issue. But yeah, we thought we would be able to participate in dialogue for those events.
No, for temporary event notices, there's only 2 statutory consultees, and as Councillor Davis said, they're the police and environmental protection. So they're the only people who can comment on a temporary event notice.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Can we present information to the police though in that process? Can we make a representation to the police?
So I'm going to look at Terrell, and she can probably answer that question more competently than I can.
Thank you, Mike. When the responsible authorities who are entitled to make an objection to a temporary event notice receive their TENs, what they tend to do is to look at any intelligence they have regarding that premises. So, for example, if an event has taken place and it has caused problems and people contact the police and environmental protection regarding them, then the next time somebody puts an objection in, they will have that information to look at and will determine whether or not to place an objection.
So they would take it into consider, if I'm understanding you correctly, Terrell. Thank you for that.
Yes.
So if my understanding is correct, it would mean that had something been presented to them, they would take that into consideration.
Yes, because if no one makes them aware that there is a problem, then when they look to their systems it looks as though there is no problem, and so they have no evidence in which to base an objection.
Yes, and just from my own understanding, my understanding of a 10 allows for up to 500 people to be present, and that music can be played if the music is not the primary reason for the event being held. So if an event had 500 people who were dining and music was an ancillary part of the proceedings, that the event could still take place and that music could still be amplified music with up to 500 people. Do you know if that's correct?
Right, so a temporary event notice is an event for 499 people.
Yeah.
If in any case, if music is ancillary to a main event, it has never been licensable. So for example, if you have a fashion show, the music that the models walk down the catwalk to, that is not a licensable activity, because actual fashion show is not a regulated activity entertainment in itself. With regards to what that temporary event notice authorises, they can select alcohol regulated entertainment. But what you need to bear in mind is certain entertainments have been deregulated by the government. So for example, live music, whether it's loud, whether it's amplified or acoustic, has been deregulated between 0800 and 2300 hours. Therefore, that's if it takes place on a licensed premise or any other workplace. And it has been deregulated between those hours in respect of recorded music if it takes place on a licensed premise. And a licensed premise means one that has a premises license or club premises certificate, not licensed by a 10. So it's very complicated. You know, one refers to 500 people, one refers to 499. But basically, if you had a field and you wanted to sell alcohol, your 10 would cover that. If there was acoustic music, there would be no limit to the number that could attend, but obviously your 10 would pull people back to 499.
And is that this? Sorry, is that the same with if it's regulated or unregulated?
Sorry,
I'm sorry, I cut across you. I apologise. Is that the same if the event is unregulated music? If it's unregulated music or regulated music or an unregulated license, there's a distinction between unregulated and regulated for events. Am I correct on that?
Any event for which a licensable activity takes place must either be done so either by authority of a premises license, a club premises certificate, or a temporary event notice. The applicant or the premises user in respect of TENS will need to explain within that notice or application the activities which they want an authorization for, i.e. activities that are licensed under the Licensing Act. Some entertainments have been deregulated over the years, and so if an entertainment which has been deregulated will take place, they do not need to state that in the authorization to which they're applying for.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was useful. I think that was useful to just get a little bit of clarity. But we are currently in the position where the members are asking questions of the other parties. So
I only have one other point, which is that when Councillor Roper spoke, then he was speaking on behalf of more than just Liz and Robert Campbell. He was authorised to speak on behalf of myself and my wife, and also on behalf of members from another house, from other residents as well.
Okay, what we have in front of us is authority to speak on behalf of 4 people, yourself and your wife and Liz and Robert. So that's what we took that Councillor Roper was.
Okay, I understand was that Sean and Lisa had also given it. I think others would have too had it been done in time. They have subsequently, the residents are all very unified, but that came after the marquee went up and after subsequent events. So thank you. Let me get off and let other people speak.
But the licensing regime is a quasi-judicial regime. We have to be very careful to make sure that we only take into account things that are licensable activities and only take into account stuff that we've been told in advance of the meeting And so that's where we are. Councillor Davis, no, Councillor Hedges, have you got a question for the other parties?
It's not really a question. It's more of a statement regarding Mark's speech, and that most of the contents of the speech was planning and temporary events, and we are a licensing committee for alcohol. That's what we're here for. So we have to disregard planning and disregard the temporary events thing. Just to say that, but Sally said all the other things that I was going to say anyway, because she's quicker than I am on the draw.
Thank you, Councillor Hedges. I've just got a couple of points of clarification, stroke questions. From what you said in the papers that we have in front of us and that you just read out now, in effect, the arguments that you have to make is that the serving of alcohol, because that's the thing that we're currently looking at, will harm one of the 4 licensing objectives. That being the case, have you got any evidence of harm to the licensing objectives? And when I say evidence of harm, I mean evidence that the sale of alcohol will cause harm as opposed to what is the current situation right now.
That's difficult to answer because there haven't sold alcohol so far. I think what we can say is that without the sale of alcohol, then there was techno music being played late on a Sunday night of the bank holiday weekend, despite a lot of communications from myself and from other people of the residents. The noise continued. It continued well into after midnight, and it was a good example of how music travels in this valley. It travels very, very easily. And so that was a case of something that was definitely noise pollution. It was antisocial, and that was without alcohol. So I don't know if that partly answers your question.
Kind of. Councillor Roper, it looks like you want to say something.
No, I was just going to agree with that, actually.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the question maybe in a different way. If what you're saying is there's already some issues with antisocial behaviour and noise pollution, what can you say to us that would make us think that it would be proportionate to put conditions on an alcohol licence? Because the alcohol bit, which is the only bit that in this particular application we can look at, we can't look at planning, we can't look at anything else. That's just not our remit. Is there anything you can say that will make us believe that by granting this licence that the alcohol bit will harm one of the 4 licensing objectives? And the answer may be no. Don't feel that you have to make something up, but I thought I'd give you the opportunity to say something.
Well, I think that the residents have already been subjected to quite a lot of nuisance by noise, and alcohol, as we know, tends to make things flow a bit louder and longer, and one knows the effect of alcohol on individual and group behaviour. So we would anticipate a large crowd of people who've been drinking for a period of time would be considerably noisier than the current setup when it's a cafe with tea and coffee.
And would that still be the case, given the fact that currently they could only serve alcohol till 4 o'clock anyway, because the planning regime doesn't allow them to be open any further? So irrespective of what licence we give, would there be a issue with alcohol being drunk up till 4 o'clock?
It is our belief that it's less likely to cause nuisance longer into the evening, because there have already been examples of late night music sessions, and if alcohol was stopped being consumed at 4 o'clock, it's less likely that they would turn into more noisy events, shall we say.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson, have you got any questions to ask the other parties?
I don't have any questions. I do have a small statement, if I'm allowed to make that.
Not really, I'm afraid.
That's fine. Then no questions.
We're in the questions.
That's fine.
Piece. There aren't any responsible authorities. That's right, isn't it, Cheryl? No, the responsible authorities have made no. What we now do is we go back to the other parties for them to have 5 minutes to sum up, and then the applicant can sum up, and that's your chance, Mr. Simpson, to do your speech that you wanted to make then. And then we move to an adjournment. So other parties, you have 5 minutes to sum up.
Does any of you guys wish to speak? Liz, Mike?
I think that if I may, I think one thing that's difficult for the committee to take fully into consideration to some degree is this whole area which we've referred to in relation to government guidelines, in relation to the area being an area of tranquility. Alcohol and people being fueled by alcohol doesn't normally contribute to tranquility. The reason that all the residents are here is because it is a very, very quiet space. I think that if things were to get out of hand via alcohol, on the occasion I referred to, then I think it was more than a coincidence, or maybe it was a coincidence. It's the first time in 17 years that we've been here that coinciding with some WhatsApp messages and some noise very close to our house, people whooping and yelling, that coincided with me sending a message saying, this is after midnight, can you please be quiet? So I think the noise pollution thing is a real, I think it's something that should really be taken into consideration. And it's not just for humans, it's also that there's wildlife and there's rare species of bats. If things are going on later, there's more light, it restricts the flight lines of the bats. And also it's a very delicate nature of in the wood for the environment. So I think I think because of the location, it's an unusual thing in relation to an alcohol license request. I think there's very particular conditions. I'm sorry to labour that. I think it's hard for the committee to be able to expect it to take all of that into consideration. And my humble request is that you take that into consideration. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hennigan. Mr. Simpson, you have 5 minutes to sum up.
Yeah, I think, although this isn't strictly what we're here to hear about, there was an incident of techno music being played late at night on the field, and I did receive representations from local people there. I'd like to point out that this was a private party that took place on land which are not. It's not land that is part of the current premises application. These were invitees of my landlord who decided to have a birthday party and borrowed the tent that we put up on the field in which so to do. And this could be heard at Brockham, I've no doubt about that. And we did take steps to turn the music off, and we made a decision at that point that we would have no further, as long as it's under my control, we'd have no further amplification in Helensfield, which in any case is not a property that this premises application is all about. I did then, since, and Mike accompanied me on this, we do have a small public address system that we use for the cafe for playing music when we haven't got acoustic folk and so on going on. And it's a 150 watt public address system, which I placed on full volume quite recently, and then went down to Brockham for a walk around to see if it was possible to hear it. And I was accompanied by Mike Hennigan on this walk, and he will be able to confirm that at those sorts of levels, it was impossible on that day to hear any music at all coming from the Pippi Barn Cafe. So I've carried out a sound test. I'm doing due diligence. I would also point out that if I am awarded a premises license for Pippi Barn, this comes with a number of responsibilities. The most important of which are the 4 licensing objectives. I have now achieved a personal license. I've done training on that. I fully understand my responsibility to neighbours and the general environment around in carrying out my operation in such a way as to support the 4 licensing objectives, and that is what I intend to do.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for making this an easy committee to chair. So I do appreciate that. Thank you. We're now going to adjourn and come to our decision. Mike will put you in a separate room, and we will invite you back in once we've made our decision. Thank you. Have we got everyone back now? Let's have a look. Yes, it looks like we have. The committee has decided to grant the application, and our legal advisor will now read out our reasons why.
Thank you, Chair. Members have determined an application for a new premises licence at Pipley Barn Cafe and Bunk Barn. In doing so, they've taken account of the Licensing Act 2003, statutory guidance, Council's policy, Human Rights Act and case law. Members are aware that the proper approach under licensing is to be reluctant to regulate in the absence of evidence and must only do what is appropriate and proportionate in the promotion of the licensing objectives on the evidence before them. Members reminded themselves that each application must be considered on its merits. The application was not for a public house, but rather a cafe offering alcoholic refreshments to passing trade, guests staying in the bunk barn, and people attending pre-booked musical events, talks, lectures, and private functions in the evenings. Such events must be pre-booked and will be low-key given the limited space. The applicant stated that since making the application, he has been made aware of the planning restriction relating to opening hours, and that the opening hours of the cafe have now been changed to comply, whilst also complying with COVID-19 requirements. He further stated that he was aware that any licence granted could only ever operate in alignment with a planning consent. In terms of the bunk barn, whilst the hours sought were 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. Monday to Thursday and 11 p.m. Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays, the barn is not currently operational due to COVID-19 and in any event can only accommodate up to 19 guests. With regard to the cafe providing alcohol after 6 p.m, the following additional conditions were offered. After 6 p.m. on any day, alcohol will only be served to persons who have previously booked or brought tickets to attend an evening event pre-organised for that particular date. No admission will be permitted to any members of the public after 6 p.m. who had not booked or purchased tickets. 2. Events held at the premises after 6 p.m. shall be limited to a maximum of 4 per calendar month. The interested parties raised the prevention of public nuisance and public safety by way of representation. With regards to public nuisance, there was a strong possibility that the tranquility of the area would be detrimentally affected if the application was granted and large weekly events ran until 11 p.m. This was on the basis that the cafe had already caused nuisance from noise, and most recently at an event held in a marquee which created noise until after midnight. The interested parties did, however, state that if the applicant were able to comply with the many planning conditions and reduce the sale of alcohol to between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m, the premises might not cause a noise nuisance. In determining the applications, members reminded themselves of the statutory guidance and the statutory policy and were careful to take account of relevant written and oral representations and balance their competing interests. Members were, however, careful to disregard matters such as those governed by other statutory regimes and issues not attributable to the requested licence activity. For example, planning consent, amenity and enforcement, traffic risks, noise and parking, well-being and need, the character, appearance and wildlife of an area, and the health and safety of those not on the premises. Accordingly, and whilst members were mindful of other statutory regimes, the statement of licence policy is clear in that there shall be no duplication of other regimes by condition or restriction, and licensing should not be used as a rerun of the planning process as different considerations apply. With regards to public nuisance, members reminded themselves that whilst licensing authorities and responsible authorities should consider what constitutes public nuisance, conditions to mitigate the effects of sound escaping from live or recorded music may not be enforceable where the activity itself is not a licensable activity. In this regard, members noted that the applicant had not applied for regulated entertainment, which includes, for example, the performance of live or recorded music, plays or dance. In terms of nuisance, members noted incidents of noise escaping from the premises were raised by interested parties. Members noted, however, that there had been no representation from environmental protection or the police, and that the interested parties confirmed they had made no complaint to them in terms of noise. Whilst members acknowledged the genuine concerns, the activities complained of are not subject to this application and cannot be conditioned or prohibited by the licensing committee. Members empathise with the interested parties' legitimate concerns and representations. Nevertheless, the general thrust of the representations related to noise associated with music and voice on the premises and separate statutory regimes. Accordingly, members considered they were unable to regulate such activities. In terms of the application for the sale of alcohol from the cafe and bunk barn, members find the application reasonable and appropriate conditions were contained in the operating schedule agreed by the police and put forward by the applicant in the additional information. Moreover, there has been no evidence or information put forward to base a reasonable belief that the sale of alcohol from the premises would have a detrimental effect on any of the licensing objectives. Accordingly, members do not depart from policy or guidance and grant the application as applied for with the additional conditions offered by the applicant. Authority is therefore delegated to the licensing officer to issue the license with conditions consistent with the operating schedule and the additional conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Shane. And can I make the interested parties aware that were there to be some of the issues that they fear happen, if they collect the evidence, we can always do a review of the licence. So it's not that we weren't believing you, but this has got to be an evidence-based regime. Thank you all very much for your time. And at 11:05, I call this meeting to a close. Thank you all.
Thanks.